My name is Hannah Wilson, 31 years old and still flinching at sudden movements. For 20 years, I watched my mother worship the ground my brother Jake walked on while he tormented me daily. Last month, everything changed when Jake showed up at my apartment with murder in his eyes and a knife in his hand. As police sirens wailed outside my building, I saw something I never expected: genuine shock on my mother's face. Before I dive into this nightmare, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more stories of family survival. I can still remember the exact moment I realized I would never be enough for my mother. I was 5 years old, clutching a paper with a gold star from my kindergarten teacher for learning to write my name, Hannah Wilson, earlier than anyone else in class. I ran into our modest suburban home, excited to show my mother Diana what I had accomplished. "Mommy, look what I got today!" I shouted, bursting with pride. But my mother barely glanced at my paper. She was too busy fawning over my 8-year-old brother Jake, who had managed to hit a single home run at his Little League practice. Not during a game, just practice. "That's nice, Hannah," she muttered without looking at me, then immediately turned back to Jake. "Tell me again how far the ball went, sweetie, my little baseball star." That was the pattern that would define my entire childhood. Jake was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was an afterthought, a disappointment by simply existing. Our family dynamic was painfully clear. My father worked long hours as a construction manager, often leaving before dawn and returning after I was in bed. When he was home, he was too exhausted to intervene in family matters. My mother Diana was the undisputed ruler of our household, and she had chosen her favorite long ago. Jake received lavish birthday parties with dozens of friends, expensive gifts, and custom cakes. For my 7th birthday, my mother forgot to buy candles. When I started crying, she said, "You are being dramatic again, Hannah. This is why people find you difficult." I learned to expect nothing and be grateful for crumbs of attention. The bullying started subtly. Jake would break my toys, then tell our mother I had done it myself. He would hide my school supplies the night before important tests, causing me to arrive unprepared and anxious. Once I spent weeks working on an art project for the school fair, a watercolor landscape that my art teacher had praised. The morning it was due, I found it soaked in water, ruined beyond repair. When I confronted Jake, he smirked. "Prove it was me," he taunted. When I told my mother, her response was automatic. "He was just playing around, Hannah. You are too sensitive. Boys will be boys." This became her mantra, her shield to avoid seeing what was happening right under her nose. Jake was just playing. I was too sensitive. I needed to toughen up. While Jake struggled academically, I excelled. I thought perhaps this might finally earn my mother's approval. I brought home perfect report cards, joined the gifted program, and spent hours studying to maintain my perfect grades. "That's nice, dear," my mother would say without enthusiasm. Then, in the same breath, "Jake is just not book smart. He has street smarts, which will take him further in life anyway. School isn't everything you know." When Jake failed math, my mother blamed the teacher. When he got detention for disrupting class, she claimed the school was targeting him. There was always an excuse, always someone else to blame. I remember clearly the day I won the school spelling bee in 4th grade. I had practiced for weeks, studying lists of words late into the night. I stood on stage, spelled perseverance correctly, and won first place. My teacher gave me a blue ribbon and a $20 bookstore gift certificate. I couldn't wait to show my mother. But when I got home clutching my prize, I found the house empty. Later that evening, my family returned, all smiles and laughter. Jake had had a baseball game the same day as my spelling bee. He struck out twice and his team lost, but my mother took him for ice cream anyway to cheer him up. No one had remembered my spelling bee despite the note I had left on the refrigerator 2 weeks earlier. "Oh, was that today?" my mother said when I showed her my ribbon, her voice flat with disinterest. "Well, that's nice. Jake had a rough game today, so maybe don't brag too much. Okay." I felt myself shrinking, becoming smaller, trying to take up less space in a family that had little room for me. I developed severe anxiety, always walking on eggshells, trying to be perfect, yet invisible at the same time. I became a people pleaser, desperately seeking approval from teachers, friends, anyone who might notice me. My father was no help. The few times I tried to talk to him about Jake's bullying, his response was dismissive. "That's just how boys are, Hannah," he would say, barely looking up from his newspaper. "Don't let it bother you so much. Your mother knows best how to handle these things." With nowhere to turn at home, I found refuge in books and in my friendship with Mia, who lived next door. Mia's home became my sanctuary. Her parents would invite me for dinner, ask me about school, and actually listen to my answers. In their home, I caught glimpses of what a normal, loving family might look like. But even this small comfort was too much for Jake to allow. When he discovered how much I valued Mia's friendship, he made it his mission to destroy it. He told Mia's parents that I had been saying terrible things about their family behind their backs. He cornered Mia at school and warned her that I was obsessed with her and dangerous. By 6th grade, Mia's parents were no longer comfortable having me over, and Mia herself began avoiding me at school. I was alone again, exactly as Jake wanted, and my mother, as always, saw nothing wrong with her precious son's behavior. By the time I entered middle school, Jake's bullying had evolved from breaking toys to breaking my spirit. At 16, he had already established himself as popular and intimidating, while I, at 13, was withdrawing further into myself. Jake's tactics became more sophisticated and psychologically devastating. He started spreading rumors about me at school, telling people I had strange habits or hygiene issues. Being Jake's weird little sister made me an instant social outcast. Girls who might have been my friends kept their distance, afraid of being associated with me and becoming targets themselves. My mother, instead of recognizing the systematic isolation Jake was creating, blamed me for being antisocial and not trying hard enough to make friends. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" became her constant refrain. "Look how many friends he has. Everyone loves Jake." Everyone except me, who saw the real Jake behind closed doors. In 8th grade, I worked for weeks on a science project about water pollution. I had collected samples from local streams, documented my findings meticulously, and built an elaborate display. The night before it was due, I left everything ready on the dining room table. The next morning, I came downstairs to find my water samples spilled across my display board, my notes soaked, and months of work ruined. I knew immediately Jake was responsible. I had seen the jealous look in his eyes when our father had actually shown interest in my project the evening before. "Look what Jake did to my science project," I cried to my mother, devastated. Her response was immediate and predictable. "Hannah Wilson, how dare you accuse your brother without proof? He was studying at Adam's house last night, you know that. You probably knocked it over yourself, and now you're trying to blame him because you're irresponsible." "But Mom, he came home at midnight. I heard him." "That's enough. I won't tolerate these lies. Go to your room right now. You're grounded this weekend for trying to get your brother in trouble." I failed the science assignment. My teacher, who had been impressed with my progress reports throughout the semester, was disappointed and confused by my empty-handed appearance on presentation day. My perfect grade in science dropped to a B. Jake's smirk across the breakfast table the next morning told me everything I needed to know. He had waited until everyone was asleep, come downstairs, and deliberately sabotaged my work. And he knew, as always, that he would face no consequences. That same year, Jake discovered my diary. I had kept it hidden under a loose floorboard in my closet, my one safe space to express my true feelings. I wrote about my loneliness, my confusion about why my mother hated me, my dreams of escaping someday. Jake not only read it, but brought it to school and read the most embarrassing entries aloud to his friends during lunch period. Someone recorded it on their phone, and soon clips were circulating among the student body. I wanted to disappear forever. When I confronted Jake at home, screaming and crying, my mother slapped me across the face. "How dare you make such a scene? Your brother would never do such a thing. You're hysterical and making up stories again." But I had seen the video. Several people had sent it to me, some mockingly, a few with pity. Meanwhile, my father grew more and more distant. He worked longer hours, took business trips whenever possible, anything to avoid the tension at home. When he was there, he retreated to his garage workshop, emerging only for meals where he would keep his eyes on his plate, ignoring the dysfunctional family dynamics playing out around him. As Jake entered high school, his academic performance continued to decline. He was smart, but lazy, preferring to coast on his charm and athletic abilities rather than apply himself. Meanwhile, I maintained straight A's partly out of genuine love of learning, but mostly because academic success was my only source of validation and my ticket to eventual freedom. But no matter how well I did, my mother always had excuses ready for Jake. "He's just not book smart," she would say. "He's a visual learner and schools don't accommodate that. Besides, he's so good with people. That will take him further in life than any grade." By this time, Jake had grown significantly taller and stronger than me. He used his physical presence to intimidate me, standing too close, blocking doorways, or accidentally bumping into me hard enough to leave bruises. I lived in constant fear in my own home, never knowing when he might appear around a corner. At 15, after a particularly vicious bullying episode where Jake convinced a girl I liked to pretend to befriend me as a joke, I hit my breaking point. I swallowed a handful of my mother's sleeping pills, wanting the pain to end. It was my father who found me returning home early from work for once. I was rushed to the hospital, had my stomach pumped, and spent 3 days in the adolescent psychiatric ward. Even this desperate cry for help was minimized by my mother. "She's always been dramatic," I overheard her telling the doctor. "She just wants attention." The hospital recommended therapy, but my mother refused. "There's nothing wrong with her that some discipline and gratitude wouldn't fix," she insisted, signing me out against medical advice. The one bright spot during this dark time was my relationship with Mrs. Thompson, my English teacher. She noticed my excellent writing, but also the sadness behind my eyes. She began lending me books that spoke to my situation stories about resilience and escape. During lunch periods, she would let me sit in her classroom, providing a safe haven from the cafeteria where I was either bullied or ignored. "You have a gift, Hannah," she told me one day, "and someday you'll find a place where that gift is valued. This is not your whole life. This is just a chapter." Those words became my lifeline. I poured all my energy into academics, knowing that education was my only escape route. I joined every academic club that would keep me at school and away from home. I studied for standardized tests as if my life depended on it, because in many ways it did. While other teenagers dreamed of cars and prom dates, I dreamed of scholarships and college acceptance letters. I dreamed of a door closing behind me as I walked away from the house that had never been a home, from the family that had never acted like one. The day my acceptance letter arrived from Northwestern University was the first time I felt genuine hope. Not only had I been accepted to a prestigious school 500 miles away from my family, but I had been offered a full academic scholarship. It was everything I had worked for, my ticket to freedom. I expected my mother to be proud, or at least impressed. Instead, her face clouded with disapproval as she read the letter I had excitedly handed her. 500 miles? That's ridiculous, Hannah. You can get a perfectly good education at the state university like Jake is planning to do." The fact that Jake had barely applied to any colleges, and certainly not Northwestern, was irrelevant. In her mind, my achievement was overshadowed by my desire to move away. "This is about abandoning your family, isn't it?" she accused, her voice sharp. "After all we've done for you." I didn't argue. I had learned long ago that defending myself was pointless. I simply took back my acceptance letter, went to my room, and began secretly planning my escape. When Jake failed to get into any four-year colleges due to his mediocre grades and incomplete applications, my mother found a way to blame me for that too. "If you hadn't been showing off with all your studying and perfect grades, your brother might have felt more confident about applying to schools," she told me over dinner one night. "You always have to outshine him, don't you?" I stared at her in disbelief. Somehow, my academic success was being twisted into a weapon I had used against Jake, rather than a shield I had built to protect myself. The day I left for Northwestern was the first day I felt like I could breathe fully. Moving into my dorm room, arranging my few belongings, meeting my roommate Sarah, who smiled at me with genuine interest, all of it felt like stepping into a new world where I might actually belong. My parents dropped me off, my father giving me an awkward pat on the back, my mother reminding me to call Jake regularly because he's really going to miss you. Jake hadn't even bothered to come along for the drive. The moment their car pulled away from the curb, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. College was transformative. For the first time in my life, I was judged on my own merits, not in comparison to Jake. Professors valued my insights. Classmates invited me to study groups and parties. I made real friends who liked me for me, not out of pity or obligation. Sarah, my roommate, became particularly important to me. She came from a large, loving family and was naturally gregarious and kind. She noticed my discomfort with basic social interactions and my surprise whenever someone treated me with simple human decency. "Hannah," she said one night as we were studying, "has anyone ever told you that you apologize when there's nothing to apologize for?" I hadn't noticed, but she was right. I apologized for existing, for taking up space, for having needs or opinions. Years of walking on eggshells around Jake and my mother had trained me to make myself small and sorry. Sarah showed me what healthy friendship looked like. She respected my boundaries, celebrated my successes without jealousy, and called me out when my own insecurities made me pull away from connections. Slowly, I began to understand that my family dynamic wasn't normal, that I deserved better treatment than I had received. During those university years, I maintained minimal contact with my family. Monthly phone calls to my mother where she would spend most of the time talking about Jake. Occasional text exchanges with my father, usually just checking that I had enough money for books and food. I never went home for summer breaks, instead finding internships and summer jobs that gave me legitimate reasons to stay away. I learned through these brief communications that Jake had dropped out of community college after one semester, claiming it was a waste of time. He moved back home, cycling through a series of part-time jobs that never seemed to last. My mother always had explanations. The boss was unfair. The job wasn't challenging enough for someone of Jake's talents. He was just taking time to find his true calling. When I graduated with honors in marketing, my family didn't attend the ceremony. My mother called the night before to inform me that they wouldn't make it because Jake is going through something right now and needs us. I never learned what that something was, but I wasn't surprised by their absence. Sarah's parents came instead, cheering loudly when my name was called and taking me out for a celebratory dinner afterward. With my degree in hand, I accepted an entry-level position at a marketing firm in Chicago, putting another 300 miles between myself and my family in rural Pennsylvania. I threw myself into building my career, working longer hours than required, volunteering for challenging projects, and studying industry trends in my spare time. My dedication paid off. Within 2 years, I was promoted to junior marketing strategist. By 26, I was managing my own small team and had built a reputation as someone reliable, creative, and hardworking. It was during this time that I met Thomas at an industry conference. Smart, kind, and perceptive, he noticed things about me that others missed. On our third date, he asked why I flinched when he moved his hand quickly to reach for the salt. I found myself telling him about Jake, about the years of torment, about my mother's willful blindness. I expected him to think I was exaggerating or damaged. Instead, he listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, and then said something that changed my perspective forever. "Hannah, that wasn't normal sibling rivalry. What you're describing is abuse enabled and reinforced by your mother." No one had ever named it so clearly before. Abuse. The word felt both shocking and instantly right, like a key sliding into a lock I hadn't known existed. With Thomas's encouragement, I started therapy at age 24. My therapist, Dr. Rivera, helped me understand the family dynamics that had shaped me: Jake as the golden child, me as the scapegoat, my mother as the enabler, my father as the absent bystander. She introduced me to terms like narcissistic family system and trauma bonding that helped make sense of my experiences. Your survival strategies, the perfectionism, the people-pleasing, the hypervigilance, they kept you safe in an unsafe environment, Dr. Rivera explained. But now they're holding you back from fully connecting with others and believing in your own worth. The work was painful but necessary. I had nightmares, panic attacks, days where grief overwhelmed me for the childhood I never had. But slowly I began to heal, to understand that I had value independent of my achievements, that I deserved love without having to earn it through perfection. I maintained limited contact with my family through occasional phone calls, always bracing myself before dialing. The conversations followed predictable patterns. My mother would complain about her health, update me on distant relatives I barely remembered, and eventually get around to Jake's latest crisis. As I built my new life, Jake's continued to spiral. He bounced between dead-end jobs, never lasting more than a few months before quitting or being fired. There were vague references to trouble with some friends that I suspected meant drug issues. Through it all, my mother remained his fiercest defender and enabler, making excuses, bailing him out, blaming others for his failures. Then the requests for money started. Jake's car broke down and he needs $2,000 for repairs. He can't get to work without it. Jake has this amazing business opportunity, but he needs $5,000 to get it started. Jake's roommate left him high and dry and he needs help with rent just until he gets back on his feet. Each time I would gently refuse, suggesting that at 30+ years old, Jake should be financially independent. Each refusal would trigger a wave of guilt trips from my mother. I don't understand how you can be so selfish when you're doing so well. Family helps family, Hannah. Or have you forgotten where you came from? Your brother would help you if the situations were reversed. But I knew better. Jake had never helped me with anything in his life, and I was done setting myself on fire to keep others warm. With support from Thomas and my therapist, I set firmer boundaries. I made it clear that while I was willing to maintain a relationship with my parents, I would not be Jake's personal bank. This decision was met with rage from both Jake and my mother, confirming that my value to them was primarily financial. As I approached my 30s, my professional success continued to grow. I was promoted to senior marketing strategist, overseeing major campaigns for national clients. Thomas and I moved in together, creating a home that felt safe and nurturing in ways my childhood house never had. For the first time, I began to think seriously about the future, about marriage, and perhaps even children, though the idea of motherhood terrified me given my own experience with maternal love. I was building a life on my own terms, healing old wounds, learning to trust and be trusted. I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March. My father had suffered a massive heart attack and died before the ambulance could reach him. Despite our distant relationship, the news hit me hard. There had always been a part of me that hoped someday he would see what was happening, stand up for me, be the father I needed. Now that possibility was gone forever. I took bereavement leave from work and flew back to Pennsylvania for the funeral, my stomach in knots at the thought of seeing my family again. Thomas offered to come with me, but I declined. This was something I needed to face alone. Walking into my childhood home for the first time in years was like stepping back in time. The same faded wallpaper, the same family photos where Jake was always center stage, and I was an afterthought. My mother greeted me with a distracted hug, already focused on the casserole someone had brought over. Jake arrived later that evening, looking older and rougher than I remembered. At 34, he had the puffy, reddened face of a heavy drinker. He barely acknowledged me when he came in, giving me a curt nod before heading straight to the kitchen to raid the refrigerator. The funeral was a small, subdued affair. My father had been a quiet man who kept to himself, so there were few friends in attendance, mostly coworkers and a couple of distant relatives. I sat beside my mother in the front pew, conscious of Jake's hulking presence on her other side. During the reception afterward, the tension that had been simmering since my arrival finally boiled over. I was speaking with one of my father's coworkers, who mentioned how proud my father had been of my career success. "He kept your business card pinned to the bulletin board in his office," the man told me. "Always mentioned when you were working on a big campaign." I was stunned. My father had never expressed this pride directly to me. Before I could process this revelation, my mother interrupted. "Jake, sweetie, come meet Richard from your father's work." As she made the introduction, she added, "Jake is quite the entrepreneur. He's between projects right now, but he has such a head for business." I couldn't stop myself from scoffing audibly. Jake's entrepreneurship consisted of a series of half-baked schemes that inevitably failed: a lawn care service, where he never showed up for appointments, an online dropshipping store he abandoned after 2 weeks, a multi-level marketing venture selling dubious nutritional supplements. My mother shot me a venomous look. "Do you have something to say, Hannah?" Perhaps it was grief, or the shock of learning my father had secretly been proud of me, or simply years of accumulated resentment, but something in me snapped. "Actually, yes," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I'm tired of the fiction that Jake is some misunderstood genius who just hasn't found the right opportunity. He's a 34-year-old man who's never held a job for more than 3 months, and you're still making excuses for him like he's a child." The room went silent. My mother's face flushed with anger. "How dare you?" she hissed. "Today of all days. Your father isn't even cold in his grave, and you're attacking your brother." I'm not attacking anyone. I'm stating facts. Facts that Dad knew but was too conflict-averse to ever address. Jake stepped forward, his face contorted with rage. You think you're better than me because you wear fancy clothes and have some corporate job? You always were a stuck-up little bitch. Jake, my mother gasped, but there was no real reproach in her voice. No, Mom, I'm done pretending. Jake continued his words slightly slurred. I realized he had been drinking throughout the service. Little Miss Perfect comes back after abandoning her family for years, and now she wants to judge me. I took a deep breath, determined to remain calm. I didn't abandon anyone, Jake. I built a life for myself, which is what adults are supposed to do. Maybe if Mom hadn't constantly coddled you, you might have done the same. My mother stepped between us. That's enough, Hannah. I think you should leave. I looked at her in disbelief. Leave? I just lost my father too, Mom. You lost the right to claim him as a father when you turned your back on this family, she said coldly. Family helps family. Family stays together. You chose your fancy career over us. The unfairness of it all was breathtaking. I had spent my childhood being tormented by Jake while she looked the other way, and now I was the villain for creating a healthy life for myself. Fine, I said, gathering my purse and coat. I'll go. But let me make one thing perfectly clear. I didn't turn my back on family. I escaped abuse. Jake bullied me mercilessly for years while you enabled and encouraged him. Dad stood by and did nothing. I didn't leave family behind. I left behind people who treated me like I wasn't worthy of basic human decency. As I headed for the door, I turned back one last time. And Mom. The next time Jake needs money for some emergency or brilliant business idea, remember this moment when you drove away the only family member who actually has any. I walked out into the cold March afternoon, got into my rental car, and drove away without looking back. I changed my flight to return to Chicago that evening, relieved to be escaping the toxic atmosphere of my childhood home. I thought that would be the end of it. A final confrontation, painful, but cleansing, allowing me to close that chapter of my life definitively. I was wrong again. The harassment started 2 days after I returned to Chicago. First came the angry texts from Jake, alternating between vicious insults and self-pitying rants about how I had always been their parents' favorite. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. Then came the voicemails, increasingly threatening as days passed. You think you're so much better than everyone, don't you? One day someone's going to take you down a peg. You've always had everything handed to you while I had to struggle. It's not fair, and someday you'll pay for it. You think you can just walk away from family. Nobody walks away from me. I blocked his number, but he began calling from different phones. My mother called too, not to apologize or check on my well-being, but to berate me for upsetting your brother and to relay Jake's latest financial crisis. He's very upset right now, Hannah. He lost his apartment and had to move back home. His landlord was completely unreasonable about the noise complaints. Jake needs help getting back on his feet. Mom, I said firmly, I am not giving Jake money. Not now, not ever. I don't understand how you can be so heartless, she replied. He's your brother. A brother who just left me threatening voicemails saying I'll pay for my success. A brother who terrorized me throughout my childhood while you watched and did nothing. He's just upset about your father. We're all grieving. Family should stick together during times like these. It was the same script, the same manipulation tactics she had always used. I realized with sudden clarity that nothing would ever change as long as I kept engaging. I'm blocking your number too, Mom, I said. I'm done with this dynamic. If you ever want a relationship with me that doesn't involve Jake or money, you can email me. I hung up and blocked her number, feeling both relieved and deeply sad. I had lost my father, and now I was choosing to cut ties with the rest of my biological family. It was necessary, but painful. For a few weeks, there was blessed silence. I threw myself into work, continued therapy, and focused on my relationship with Thomas. I began to think perhaps Jake and my mother had finally gotten the message. Then came the night that changed everything. It was just after 11 on a Friday evening. Thomas was out of town at a conference, and I was alone in our apartment reading in bed before sleep. The buzzer for the building's front door rang, startling me. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not this late. I went to the intercom. Hello. It's Jake, Let me in. We need to talk. My blood ran cold. Jake was in Chicago. How did he even know where I lived? Jake, it's late and I'm not comfortable with you coming up. How did you find my address? Mom had it from sending you that Christmas card. Stop being difficult and let me in. It's freezing out here. No, I said firmly. I don't want to see you. Please leave or I'll call building security. There was a moment of silence, then a string of obscenities that made me step back from the intercom. I hung up, my heart racing. I immediately called building security and informed them that someone was harassing me at the front door and should not be allowed in under any circumstances. I then texted Thomas to let him know what was happening. As I was typing, I heard a loud banging on my apartment door. Somehow Jake had gotten into the building. Hannah, open this goddamn door right now! His voice was slurred and rage-filled. I backed away, phone in hand, and locked myself in the bedroom. I called 911, my voice shaking as I explained the situation. My estranged brother is trying to break into my apartment. He's been threatening me for weeks. I think he's drunk and I'm afraid he might hurt me. The dispatcher assured me police were on the way and advised me to stay on the line. Meanwhile, the banging on my front door grew louder, punctuated by Jake's shouts. I know you're in there. You can't ignore me. Open this door, you stuck-up bitch. Then came the sound of splintering wood. Jake was breaking down my door. He's getting in, I whispered to the dispatcher. Please hurry. Police are 2 minutes out, she assured me. Stay hidden and stay on the line. I heard my front door crash open, followed by Jake's heavy footsteps in my living room. Where are you, Hannah? He called out, his voice eerily sing-song. Come out wherever you are. We need to have a family meeting. I pressed myself against the wall beside my bed, trying to control my panicked breathing. Through the bedroom door, I could hear Jake rampaging through my apartment, knocking things over, breaking objects. Found your fancy awards, he slurred. Senior Strategist of the Year. What a joke. I heard the sound of glass shattering as he smashed the award I had received just months earlier. My bedroom doorknob rattled. Is little Hannah hiding in here just like when we were kids? Remember how I always found you? I looked desperately around the room for a weapon, anything to defend myself. The door began to splinter as Jake threw his weight against it. The police are coming, I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. They'll be here any second. Good, Jake replied, his voice cold and determined now. Then they can find both of us. With a final crash, the bedroom door gave way. Jake stood in the doorframe, swaying slightly. His face was flushed, his eyes bloodshot, and in his right hand, he held a hunting knife. You think you can cut me off? He snarled, advancing into the room. You think you can turn Mom against me? Tell everyone I'm some kind of failure while you're so successful? I backed away, the bed between us. Jake put down the knife. This isn't going to solve anything. Shut up, he screamed. You've always thought you were better than me, always showing off with your grades and your job and your perfect life. Nobody asked you to be so perfect all the time. He lunged across the bed, knife extended toward me. I scrambled backward, tripping over a chair and falling hard. Jake followed, grabbing my ankle with his free hand and dragging me toward him. Let me go, I screamed, kicking at his hand with my other foot. You ruined everything, he hissed, raising the knife. You always ruin everything. I kicked harder, connecting with his wrist. The knife clattered to the floor, and I seized the moment to scramble away, diving into the attached bathroom and slamming the door shut. There was no lock, so I braced myself against it, pushing with all my strength. Jake threw his weight against the other side, the thin door bending inward with each impact. I knew it wouldn't hold for long. You can't hide from me, Hannah, he shouted. You never could. Just as the door began to crack, I heard new voices in my apartment. Police, drop any weapons and put your hands where we can see them. Jake paused his assault on the door. For a moment there was silence. Then a renewed fury as he slammed against the door one final time, splintering it partially open. I saw his hand reach through the gap, trying to grab me. Then came the sounds of a struggle, officers shouting commands, Jake cursing and fighting. Finally, the metallic click of handcuffs and an officer's voice. We've got him secured. I stayed frozen in place until a female officer approached the damaged bathroom door. Ms. Wilson, I'm Officer Reyes. You're safe now. Your brother is in custody. Can you come out? Shaking, I emerged to find my bedroom in shambles and 3 officers restraining Jake, who was still struggling and shouting obscenities. When he saw me, his face contorted with hate. "This isn't over," he spat. "You think you've won? This is your fault, all of it." As they led him away, I noticed for the first time that my arms were bleeding from defensive wounds I hadn't even felt in the moment. Officer Reyes guided me to sit on the edge of the bed and called for paramedics. "He really tried to kill me," I whispered, the reality of the situation finally hitting me. "My own brother came here to murder me." "You're safe now," Officer Reyes assured me, her voice kind but firm. "He's going to jail, and with that knife and the threats, he's looking at serious charges." As paramedics arrived to treat my cuts, I gave my statement to the police detailing Jake's threats leading up to the attack. They photographed my injuries, the damage to my apartment, and collected Jake's knife as evidence. I was answering follow-up questions when a commotion in the hallway caught everyone's attention. A familiar voice was arguing with an officer stationed at my door. "I'm his mother. I need to see my son. What have you done with him?" My mother had somehow followed Jake to Chicago. Officer Reyes looked at me questioningly. I nodded tiredly. "It's my mother. She can come in." My mother burst into the apartment, wild-eyed and frantic. She stopped short when she saw me sitting on the couch, paramedics bandaging cuts on my arms. "What happened? Where's Jake? The officer downstairs said he's been arrested." Before I could answer, Officer Reyes stepped forward. "Ma'am, your son broke into this apartment armed with a knife and attempted to assault Ms. Wilson. He's being charged with breaking and entering assault with a deadly weapon and attempted murder." My mother's face went pale, her eyes darting between the officer and me. "There must be some mistake. Jake wouldn't. He couldn't." "He did," I said quietly. "He broke down 2 doors to get to me, destroyed my property, and came at me with a hunting knife, saying it was all my fault." For just a moment, I saw genuine shock in my mother's eyes, perhaps the first glimpse of reality penetrating her carefully constructed fantasy world where Jake could do no wrong. But the moment passed, quickly replaced by her familiar defense mechanism. "He's been under so much stress since your father died," she began. "He doesn't handle alcohol well. I'm sure he didn't mean to actually hurt you. He just wanted to talk to make things right between you." "With a knife?" Officer Reyes asked incredulously. My mother ignored her, focusing on me. "Hannah, you're not going to press charges against your own brother, are you? This would destroy his life. One mistake shouldn't define him." I stared at her in disbelief. "One mistake, Mom, he tried to kill me. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a bad moment. He drove hundreds of miles with a weapon, broke into my home, and hunted me through my own apartment. And you're still defending him." "He's your brother," she insisted, as if that explained and excused everything. "Ma'am," Officer Reyes interjected firmly, "this isn't a situation where the victim decides whether to press charges. Your son committed multiple serious felonies. The state will be pressing charges regardless." As if on cue, 2 more officers appeared at the door. "Ms. Diana Wilson?" one asked. My mother turned. "Yes." "We need you to come with us to answer some questions about your son's activities tonight. There's evidence suggesting you may have helped him locate your daughter's address." My mother's face hardened. "I simply told him where his sister lived. That's not a crime." "That will be for the district attorney to determine, ma'am. Please come with us." As they led my mother away, she looked back at me one last time. "This is your fault, Hannah. If you had just helped your brother when he needed it, none of this would have happened." Even now, with her son in handcuffs for attempted murder, I was still to blame. Some things never changed. As the door closed behind them, I sat in my devastated apartment, surrounded by paramedics, police officers documenting the scene, and the shattered remnants of the life I had carefully built. For the first time since I was a teenager, I allowed myself to cry openly, great heaving sobs that came from the depths of my soul. I had escaped my family once before. Now I would have to do it again, but this time I wouldn't be alone. The days following Jake's attack passed in a blur of police statements, hospital visits for my injuries, and the jarring task of finding a new place to live. I couldn't bear to stay in the apartment where Jake had tried to kill me. Thomas rushed back from his conference horrified by what had happened and furious that he hadn't been there to protect me. He stayed by my side through medical examinations, police interviews, and the exhausting process of documenting every threatening message Jake had sent me over the previous weeks. "I'm so sorry I didn't take his threats more seriously," I told Thomas as we sorted through damaged belongings in my apartment. "I knew Jake had issues, but I never thought he would actually try to—" "This is not your fault," Thomas said firmly, taking my hands in his. "None of this is your fault. Jake is responsible for his actions, and so is your mother for enabling him all these years." My mother had been released after questioning with orders not to leave the state while the investigation continued into whether she had knowingly assisted Jake in finding me. Meanwhile, Jake remained in custody, denied bail due to the violent nature of the attack and the judge's assessment that he posed a continued threat. 2 days after the attack, I received a call from the district attorney's office. "Ms. Wilson, I'm ADA Melissa Chen. I'll be handling the case against your brother. I wanted to let you know that we're charging him with home invasion, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and attempted murder in the first degree." "First degree?" I asked, surprised. "Doesn't that mean it was planned?" "Yes," she confirmed. "Based on the evidence we've gathered, including his threatening messages to you, the fact that he traveled interstate with a weapon, and statements he made to arresting officers, we believe this was a premeditated attempt on your life." The words hit me like a physical blow. My own brother had deliberately set out to murder me. "I also want to prepare you," ADA Chen continued. "Your mother has been in contact with our office. She's attempting to present this as a mental health episode and is pushing for reduced charges and psychiatric evaluation rather than incarceration." "Of course she is," I said bitterly. "Ms. Wilson, I want to assure you that we take this case very seriously. Your brother's actions show clear premeditation and intent. While we will evaluate any legitimate mental health concerns, that doesn't negate his responsibility or the danger he poses." True to the ADA's warning, my mother's campaign began in earnest. First came a series of voicemails, each more manipulative than the last. "Hannah, Jake is very sorry for what happened. He was drunk and grieving your father. He needs help, not prison. The lawyer says Jake could face 20 years. 20 years, Hannah. How can you do this to your own brother? If you just dropped the charges and told them it was a misunderstanding, this could all go away. We could be a family again." I didn't respond to any of these messages, forwarding them instead to ADA Chen as evidence of continued harassment. Then my mother escalated by showing up at my workplace. I was in a meeting when my assistant interrupted to tell me there was a woman in the lobby claiming to be my mother and causing a scene. "She's saying it's a family emergency," my assistant explained, looking worried. I excused myself from the meeting and went to the lobby, where I found my mother arguing loudly with the security guard. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I asked, embarrassed and angry. "You won't answer my calls," she said accusingly. "We need to talk about Jake, about how we're going to help him." "There is no we in this situation," I said firmly. "Jake tried to kill me. He's facing the consequences of his actions. He's sick, Hannah. He needs treatment, not punishment. If you would just tell the prosecutor it was all a misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding. He brought a knife to my home and explicitly said he wanted to hurt me." My mother's face hardened. "You always were selfish. After everything we did for you growing up, you can't make one sacrifice for your brother." Several of my coworkers were now watching the exchange. I felt my face burning with humiliation. "Ms. Wilson," the security guard interjected, "would you like me to escort this woman out?" "Yes, please," I said, relieved. "You're tearing this family apart," my mother shouted as the guard led her toward the exit. "Your father would be ashamed of you." My boss, Aaron, had witnessed the entire scene. Instead of the reprimand I half expected, he approached me with concern. "Hannah, take the rest of the day off. And tomorrow too, if you need it. Family situations can be incredibly difficult." "I'm so sorry about this," I began, but Aaron cut me off. "You have nothing to apologize for. Your work has always been exceptional. Your personal safety and well-being matter to us." His kindness nearly broke me. I returned to my office, gathered my things, and left through a side entrance to avoid any chance of encountering my mother again. That evening, Thomas helped me secure a temporary restraining order against my mother. It felt extreme cutting off the last member of my biological family, but her behavior had become increasingly erratic and intrusive. Meanwhile, Jake's case proceeded. At his preliminary hearing, my mother testified on his behalf, claiming that he had been suffering from undiagnosed mental health issues exacerbated by grief and alcohol. Jake has always been sensitive, she told the court, conveniently omitting his history of bullying and aggression. Hannah always provoked him, always had to be better than him at everything. It drove him to desperation. I sat in stunned silence as my mother effectively blamed me for my own attempted murder. The judge thankfully seemed unimpressed by this reasoning. Dr. Rivera. My therapist helped me process the ongoing trauma and maintain my resolve. What you're experiencing now is an extension of the family dynamic you grew up with, she explained. Your mother is still casting Jake as the victim and you as the problem, even in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. This is about her inability to face reality, not about any failing on your part. With her guidance, I learned to stand firm against the waves of guilt and manipulation. I also began seeing a trauma specialist to address the PTSD symptoms I was experiencing: nightmares, hypervigilance, panic attacks triggered by sudden noises. My support network expanded beyond Thomas and Dr. Rivera. Sarah flew in from Boston to stay with us for a week, bringing her warmth and unwavering loyalty. My coworkers rallied around me, adjusting deadlines and workflows to accommodate my court appearances. My mother, finding her direct appeals unsuccessful, took a new approach: social media. She created posts describing Jake as a troubled but loving son who needed mental health treatment, not incarceration. She painted me as vindictive and unforgiving, destroying the family out of spite. Some distant relatives and family friends I hadn't spoken to in years began contacting me, urging me to find it in my heart to forgive and not tear the family apart. It was surreal to be cast as the villain in a story where I was the one who had nearly been killed. But then again, that had been the dynamic my entire life: Jake as the victim, me as the problem, regardless of the facts. Just when I thought the situation couldn't become more painful, I received an unexpected call from a number I didn't recognize. Hannah, it's your Aunt Lisa, your father's sister. I hadn't seen Aunt Lisa since I was a child. She and my mother had never gotten along, and after one particularly heated argument when I was 10, she had stopped visiting altogether. I saw Diana's posts online, she explained. They didn't sound right to me. I remember how she always favored Jake when you were children. I wanted to hear your side of the story. For the first time, I found myself telling the full, unvarnished truth about my childhood to someone who had actually been there, someone who might have seen glimpses of the reality behind my mother's carefully constructed facade. I always suspected something wasn't right, Lisa said when I finished. Your father, he knew too deep down. He just wasn't strong enough to stand up to Diana. He was conflict avoidant to a fault. Why didn't anyone help me? I asked the question that had haunted me for decades. Lisa sighed heavily. We failed you, Hannah. I should have pushed harder, should have stayed in touch with you even after Diana cut me out. I'm sorry. Her apology, simple and sincere, was the first I'd ever received from anyone in my family. It released something tight and painful in my chest. I believe you, she said firmly, and I'm on your side. If you need someone to testify about the family dynamics I witnessed when you were young, I'm willing. For the first time since Jake's attack, I felt a small spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the truth would finally be acknowledged. Jake's case never went to trial. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of a lengthy prison sentence, he accepted a plea deal: 7 to 10 years for attempted murder with mandatory psychiatric evaluation and treatment. I sat in the courtroom during his sentencing hearing, watching as the brother who had tormented me for decades stood before the judge in handcuffs and a prison jumpsuit. He looked smaller, somehow diminished without our mother's constant protection and validation. When asked if he wanted to make a statement, Jake surprised me. I'm sorry, he said, his voice flat. I wasn't thinking straight. I was drunk and angry. I never meant to actually hurt Hannah. Even now, he couldn't fully own his actions, couldn't acknowledge the deliberate nature of his attack. It was always something else: the alcohol, the anger, the grief, never Jake himself making conscious choices. The judge wasn't impressed. "Mr. Wilson, the evidence clearly shows that your actions were premeditated. You traveled interstate with a weapon and broke into your sister's home with the expressed intent to cause her harm. Your history of threatening messages indicates this was not a momentary lapse in judgment, but the culmination of a pattern of escalating behavior." My mother sat in the front row, silently weeping as the judge continued. "Furthermore, I find it deeply concerning that throughout these proceedings, you have demonstrated minimal genuine remorse or insight into the seriousness of your actions. Your primary concern appears to be the consequences you face rather than the harm you caused." The judge sentenced Jake to 8 years with the possibility of parole after serving 5 contingent on completion of anger management and substance abuse treatment programs. As officers led Jake away, he looked back at me one last time. There was no discernible remorse in his expression, only the same resentment that had characterized our entire relationship. My mother collapsed in tears as the sentence was pronounced. Several people moved to comfort her while I sat alone on the opposite side of the courtroom, feeling nothing but exhausted relief that the ordeal was finally over. As I gathered my things to leave, my mother approached me, her face tear-stained but her eyes hard. "How could you do this to your brother?" she demanded, as if the entire situation were my creation. I looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time seeing her clearly, a woman so committed to her distorted view of reality that she could witness her son attempt to murder her daughter and still somehow blame the victim. "I didn't do anything to Jake," I said calmly. "He did this to himself with your help. For 30 years you taught him he could hurt me without consequences. Now he's learning otherwise." "He's going to prison because of you," she hissed. "No, Mom. He's going to prison because he broke into my home with a knife and tried to kill me. Those are his actions, his choices." "What am I supposed to do now?" she asked, suddenly looking lost. "He's all I have left." "That was your choice too," I replied. "You chose Jake over me at every opportunity. You chose to enable his worst behaviors instead of setting boundaries. You chose to blame me for his failings instead of holding him accountable." "Was I wrong?" she whispered, and for a brief moment I saw genuine doubt in her eyes, perhaps the first real questioning of her parenting in 30 years. But I knew better than to hope for real change. My mother's momentary doubt was about her own future without Jake to focus on, not about the damage she had done to both her children through her toxic favoritism. "Goodbye, Mom," I said, walking past her toward the door where Thomas waited. "I hope someday you can see what you've done." I didn't look back. I had spent too many years looking back, trying to understand why my family couldn't love me properly, trying to earn the approval that would never come. It was time to look forward. In the weeks following the sentencing, I focused on rebuilding. Thomas and I found a new apartment in a secure building with doorman service. I continued therapy, working through the complex layers of trauma from both my childhood and the recent attack. My restraining order against my mother remained in place, but she found ways to circumvent it. She sent letters to my workplace, emails from new addresses, messages through acquaintances. Some expressed anger, others played on guilt, but increasingly they carried a note of desperation as she faced life without Jake to focus on. Through Aunt Lisa, I learned that my mother's health was declining. Whether genuine or psychosomatic, she had developed various ailments that required frequent doctor visits. Lisa suspected it was partly a bid for attention now that Jake wasn't there to absorb all her energy. "She's using her health to try to draw you back in," Lisa warned me. "She's telling everyone who will listen that the stress of the family situation is making her ill, and that if only you would reconcile with her, she might recover." It was manipulative but no longer effective. I had learned to recognize these tactics and to protect myself from their emotional pull. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my life on my own terms. Thomas proposed on a quiet evening at home, presenting me with a vintage emerald ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "I want to build a family with you, Hannah," he said. "A real family based on mutual respect and genuine love." I said yes, though the prospect of marriage brought up complex emotions. What did I know about healthy families? What if I carried forward the toxic patterns I had grown up with? Dr. Rivera helped me work through these fears. "The fact that you're asking these questions shows you're already breaking the cycle," she assured me. You're conscious of the patterns and actively working to create something different. That awareness is the first and most crucial step. Planning our small wedding became a healing exercise. Sarah would be my maid of honor. Mrs. Thompson, my high school English teacher, who had provided such crucial support during my darkest teenage years, agreed to attend. Thomas's warm, functional family welcomed me without reservation. There would be no one from my immediate family present, a fact that brought both sadness and relief. No drama, no tension, just people who genuinely cared about us. A year after Jake's attack, I received a letter from him. At first, I couldn't bring myself to open it, afraid of what new accusations or manipulations it might contain. It sat on my desk for 3 days before I finally worked up the courage to read it. To my surprise, it contained what appeared to be the beginnings of genuine remorse. "I've had a lot of time to think in here," Jake wrote. "The therapist they make me see says I need to take responsibility for my actions instead of blaming others. I'm trying to understand why I was so angry with you all the time. Maybe because Mom always compared me to you and I never measured up. That's not your fault, though. I see that now." It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of the harm he had caused, but it was more insight than Jake had ever demonstrated before. Still, I chose not to respond. Whatever journey of self-discovery Jake was on, it was his to walk alone. I no longer needed to be part of his narrative. My mother's health continued to decline according to Lisa's updates. She had been hospitalized twice for issues that doctors couldn't fully explain. Lisa suspected depression and anxiety were manifesting as physical symptoms. "She's asking for you," Lisa told me during one of our monthly phone calls. "She says she needs to see you." "Is she dying?" I asked bluntly. "No," Lisa admitted. "The doctors say she's physically stable. It's more psychological than anything." Then my answer is still no. I'm not ready to see her, and I'm not sure I ever will be. The guilt was still there, the deeply ingrained sense that I was responsible for my mother's well-being, but it no longer controlled me. I had learned to distinguish between genuine obligation and unhealthy enmeshment. As my wedding day approached, I found myself thinking more about the concept of family and what it truly meant. The people who would surround me as I married Thomas were not related to me by blood, but they had shown me more genuine love and support than my biological family ever had. Sarah, who had stood by me through college and beyond, who had shown me what real friendship looked like. Mrs. Thompson, who had recognized my pain as a teenager and offered quiet guidance. My colleagues, who had rallied around me during the court proceedings. Aunt Lisa, who had apologized for not protecting me as a child and was trying to make amends. Thomas, who loved me not despite my wounds but as a whole person, scars and all. These were the people I had chosen and who had chosen me in return. This was my real family. 2 days before the wedding, my mother showed up at our apartment building. The doorman, aware of the situation, called up to warn me. "There's a woman named Diana Wilson in the lobby," he said. "She says she's your mother and needs to speak with you urgently. I can send her away if you prefer." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to refuse to maintain the boundary I had worked so hard to establish. But another part, perhaps the therapist in training that I was becoming through my own healing journey, was curious about what had brought her here after months of respecting the restraining order. "I'll come down," I decided. "But please stay nearby in case there's a problem." My mother looked older than when I had last seen her at Jake's sentencing 6 months earlier. Her hair had more gray, her face more lines. She sat in one of the lobby chairs, clutching her purse, looking small and uncertain. She stood when she saw me. "Hannah, thank you for coming down." I maintained a safe distance. "What do you want, Mom?" "I needed to see you, to talk to you face to face." "About what?" She took a deep breath. "I've been seeing a therapist. Lisa's idea. At first, I just went to get her to stop nagging me. But it's making me think about things. About how I raised you and Jake." I said nothing, waiting. "The therapist says I created an unhealthy dynamic. That I favored Jake because he reminded me of myself, and that I was harder on you because—" She paused, seemingly struggling to continue. "Because what?" I prompted. "Because you look so much like your father's first love," she said finally. "The woman he was engaged to before he met me. He never fully got over her, I think. When you were born with her same red hair, her eyes, I couldn't help but see her in you, and resent it. It was such a petty small reason for a lifetime of emotional neglect that I almost laughed, but the pain beneath it was real. That wasn't my fault, I said quietly. No, my mother agreed, surprising me. It wasn't. Nothing was your fault, Hannah. I was wrong. About everything. She started to cry, not the manipulative tears I had seen her use countless times to get her way, but deep body-shaking sobs of genuine grief. I failed you as a mother. I let Jake hurt you because it was easier than admitting there was something wrong with how I was raising him. I blamed you for his failures because I couldn't bear to see my own mistakes reflected in him. I'm sorry, Hannah. I'm so sorry. I stood there watching this woman who had caused me so much pain finally break under the weight of her own actions. And I felt nothing. No triumph, no vindication, not even anger anymore. Just a quiet acceptance that this moment had come too late to change anything between us. I appreciate your apology, I said formally. I hope your therapy continues to help you. She looked up, hope dawning in her eyes. Then you forgive me. We can start over. I can forgive you, Mom. For my own peace, not for yours. But we can't start over. Too much has happened. But I'm your mother, she said, falling back on her old refrain. We're family. Family isn't just blood, Mom. It's actions. It's choices. It's being there for someone consistently putting their needs on equal footing with your own. You and Jake never did that for me. I'm trying to change, she insisted. I believe you, I said, surprised to find that I meant it. But that change is your journey, not mine. I've built a life without you, a good life with people who value me. I'm getting married in 2 days to a wonderful man. I know, she said softly. Lisa told me. I don't expect an invitation. I just wanted to see you before you started your new life, to tell you I was wrong. In that moment, I saw my mother clearly, a flawed, damaged woman who had made terrible choices and was only now beginning to recognize their consequences. I felt pity for her, but also a firm resolve to protect the life and family I had created for myself. Goodbye, Mom, I said, turning toward the elevator. I wish you well. Hannah, she called after me, are you happy in your new life? I looked back at her one last time. Yes, I am. And it was true. Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, I had found my way to happiness. I had broken the cycle of abuse, had learned to trust and be trusted, to love and be loved properly. As I rode the elevator back up to our apartment, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. My mother's acknowledgement of her failings didn't erase the past, but it confirmed what I had spent years coming to accept. The problem had never been me. 2 days later, I married Thomas in a small garden ceremony surrounded by chosen family. Sarah stood beside me as maid of honor, radiant in emerald green. Mrs. Thompson sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Thomas's parents welcomed me with genuine warmth. As we exchanged vows under a canopy of white flowers, I felt a profound sense of peace. The cycle was broken. The patterns of my childhood would not define my future. That evening at our intimate reception, I found myself speaking with Mrs. Thompson, the English teacher who had been my lifeline during high school. I always knew you would find your way, Hannah, she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You had such strength in you even then. I didn't feel strong, I admitted. I felt broken. The strongest people often do, she replied. It's not about never breaking, it's about how you put yourself back together. Looking around at the people gathered to celebrate our marriage, I realized that's exactly what I had done. I had gathered the pieces of myself, added new ones along the way, and created something whole and beautiful from what had once been shattered. I had learned that family isn't defined by blood or obligation, but by love and choice. It's found in the people who see you at your most vulnerable and stay anyway. The ones who celebrate your successes without jealousy and support you through failures without judgment. The ones who make space for your whole self, shadows and light alike. Sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away from those who cannot or will not love you properly no matter who they are. And sometimes the greatest healing comes not from reconciliation with those who hurt you, but from building something new with those who won't. As Thomas and I danced our first dance as husband and wife, I rested my head on his shoulder and felt gratitude wash over me. For the pain that had shaped me, but not defined me. For the strength I had found in myself. For the family I had chosen and who had chosen me in return. I had survived. More than that, I had thrived. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. Have you ever had to choose between forgiveness and self-preservation? What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to prioritize their own well-being. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into.